Hi, I'm Jess, and 1 year ago I was hired as the campaign manager for Northampton North. It's been a busy year, but we're making real progress. My focus has been on growing our membership and recruiting new activists. We have a fantastic team out knocking on doors and hearing from residents all year round. Because of this, we have a team ready to win at the next election.
My name is Akram Mwanga. My role is Borough Campaign Manager for Barking and Newham. My role involves bridging the communication gap between the association officers and the volunteers, and also the voters, and also CCHQ. I'm the go-to man.
My name's Reece Fox and I'm the Borough Campaign Manager for Enfield and Haringey. When I started in Enfield and Haringey in 2017, my main aim was to build capacity. My team were going out once a week with maybe 1 or 2 people. Now, in 2019, they're going out 3 times a week with triple that figure. And that capacity building programme is really paying off.
It's been hard work, but now that the association has me as a full-time campaign manager, we can work together to get more members and more activists. And it's working. We've managed to grow our membership by more than 1/3 in just 12 months. It's partly because of the approach we take. I'm a big believer in making campaigning fun.
My priorities for the future are training and more training, getting more volunteers, and we need to get the support base for the party to carry out a massive campaign. We need to get more volunteers and capable to go onto the doorstep and engage with voters on a day-to-day basis.
It is thanks to your support that we can continue to build capacity.
Across the country, campaign managers like me are doing great work, winning elections, raising money and bringing in new members.
Labour are ready. In the last 7 months, they have recruited 102 members of staff. So with your support, we can continue to build capacity and take the fight to Labour.
Hi, I'm Jess, and 1 year ago I was hired as the campaign manager for Northampton North. It's been a busy year, but we're making real progress. My focus has been on growing our membership and recruiting new activists. We have a fantastic team out knocking on doors and hearing from residents all year round. Because of this, we have a team ready to win at the next election.
My name is Akram Mwanga. My role is Borough Campaign Manager for Barking and Newham. My role involves bridging the communication gap between the association officers and the volunteers, and also the voters, and also CCHQ. I'm the go-to man.
My name's Reece Fox and I'm the Borough Campaign Manager for Enfield and Haringey. When I started in Enfield and Haringey in 2017, my main aim was to build capacity. My team were going out once a week with maybe 1 or 2 people. Now, in 2019, they're going out 3 times a week with triple that figure. And that capacity building programme is really paying off.
It's been hard work, but now that the association has me as a full-time campaign manager, we can work together to get more members and more activists. And it's working. We've managed to grow our membership by more than 1/3 in just 12 months. It's partly because of the approach we take. I'm a big believer in making campaigning fun.
My priorities for the future are training and more training, getting more volunteers, and we need to get the support base for the party to carry out a massive campaign. We need to get more volunteers and capable to go onto the doorstep and engage with voters on a day-to-day basis.
It is thanks to your support that we can continue to build capacity.
Across the country, campaign managers like me are doing great work, winning elections, raising money and bringing in new members.
Labour are ready. In the last 7 months, they have recruited 102 members of staff. So with your support, we can continue to build capacity and take the fight to Labour.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 11th live semi-final of Tories Have Got Talent. It's great to see so many of you here. We've got a lot of young people here today because there's a young Conservative conference going on down the road, so we've shipped them in as well. I don't think there's a spare seat in the house. And welcome to the gentleman who's brought his 5-week-old baby with him today. I did phone social services because I'm not sure I'd wish this on a 5-week-old baby. Right, my name's Ian Dale. I present the evening show on LBC Radio every evening, and I'm going to be your compere for the day today. Let me tell you the format. Each of the candidates will have 7 minutes to persuade you to vote for them. Normally at that point, I then interview them for 10 minutes. But because there's so many of you here, and you look as if you're bursting with questions, I thought I would forego my 10 minutes today and hand it over to you. And that is an easy way to get an audience on side right from the beginning, isn't it? Now, some of you have pre-submitted questions, so we'll start with those, and then we'll come to spontaneous questions from the floor. What I would urge you is not to just ask the normal things. We don't want to have 40 minutes of questions on Brexit. Now, we do want Brexit questions, fine, but not for the whole 40 minutes. There are so many subjects which you could bring up, which actually haven't been brought up in some of the other hustings. So be a little bit innovative with your questions. And don't be afraid of asking difficult questions. They are here for you to scrutinise them. They're going to be, one of them is going to be leader of the Conservative Party and our Prime Minister. So they're used to trying to answer very difficult questions. So don't be shy, is what I'm saying. We're also going to have 2 short warm-up speeches. We did try and book Kylie Minogue, but she wasn't available. There will be no interval, by the way, so just be comfortable for the next 2 hours. So, if you get my drift. Right, first warm-up act is Andrew Sharp. He's president of the Conservative National Convention. Andrew.
It's great to see so many people here. You won't be surprised to hear that there's been huge interest in attending these hustings, and that's necessitated more than one change of venue around the country. It's great to see our members engaging in such a massive scale, but I'm not at all surprised. And actually, this exercise has been very positive for our party. You'll have seen plenty of positive media commentary on the subject of these hustings. In fact, the quality of the questions from Birmingham a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago now, were described even by the FT as spot on. But we are still facing an uphill struggle. We were recently described by the New York Times, no less, as a fanatical sect. Well, maybe not a sect. Eh? And of course the media narrative will shift. I overheard a journalist this morning on the train up saying, of course, the activists are not the same as the members. So bear that one in mind, ladies and gentlemen. So the party that I and my national convention officers know, the one that we see every week as we travel around the country, is made up of engaged and engaging men and women of every colour, faith, sexual preference, and of course age. And as Ian said, it's great to see so many young Conservatives here today, so give yourselves a pat on the back. Now, speaking as a male who is a bit pale and hopefully not entirely stale, it is great to see so many young people engaging with the party. And I'd actually like to pay tribute to James Pearson, one of my vice presidents, and his work on the Young Conservatives. He's done a good job in getting things back on the road for that. Now, I've never met anybody in our party who cares where you come from. We only care where you're going. And we mustn't forget there's far more that unites us than divides us. Lord Hailsham said this: conservatism is not so much a philosophy as an attitude, a constant force performing a timeless function in the development of a free society. And of course, we're here to undertake a solemn duty as part of that commitment to a free society, because we're not just electing a party leader, but a Prime Minister. Now, the country we love would expect that to be rigorous, and of course Ian's here to make sure it is so. But we need a Prime Minister who will deliver Brexit and who can beat our political opponents. And those of us who knock on doors week in and week out know that those political opponents are far less committed to that free society than we are. We made the case at the party board that the leadership campaign had to reach every part of the United Kingdom and that all members should have at least access to at least one hustings. And there was no disagreement on this. And at this point, I'd like to thank the party chairman, the Right Honourable Brandon Lewis, for his support. And I'd also like to thank him more generally for his support for the voluntary party. Finally, can I also thank your regional team, led by Lee Higgins, who's here somewhere. He's right there. Lee's a tireless advocate for the East Midlands, as I'm sure you're all aware, and he's deservedly held in very high esteem. Now, before I hand over, can I ask one last favour? You will have all seen some literature on your chairs about the campaign manager programme. This is pretty simple. Where we have campaign managers, we do well. Where we don't, we don't. So could you please read all of that and perhaps take some interest in it and get involved with the programme? Can I also ask that on our way out today, you'll see people jangling buckets. If you could make a small donation, that would also help to this programme. So that's it from me. Please enjoy your morning and early afternoon, and obviously make sure your questions are also spot on. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is an important announcement to make about supermarkets. So let's welcome our very own Dale Winton, Brandon Lewis.
It's always worth thanking a veteran broadcaster for giving you the best introduction that you could come across. I thought that would just be a fair riposte. Look, Ian's right. Just some of you in the room will be enjoying the good courtesy of Aldi's car park at the moment. The ops team has said to me, could I just say to everybody, if you have used the Aldi car park, let's remember to thank them by popping in there when you leave. Maybe get a Satsuma or something to take home later on today. Look, I'm just here to say a huge thank you for coming today. Andrew's absolutely right. We felt it was hugely important to get every part of the United Kingdom, every region of England as well, covered with these hustings. And it seems very fitting. It's very special for me, particularly, to be back here in Nottinghamshire for the East Midlands. Having stood in Sherwood myself back in 2001, where we now have the great Mark Spencer as a local MP. One of those key seats that we have won and that we need to not only retain, but we can see the benefit of what a campaign manager can do, as we have in Mansfield, as we need to in Ashfield and wider across the East Midlands, in the seats we don't just want to and need to hold, but the seats that we want to gain in the way that we gained Ben Bradley's seat when he won. We need to make sure that we are funding those campaign managers to deliver wins in Ashfield and potentially, as I say, more widely afield as well. So Andrew's again absolutely right. When you leave, please do have a look at that campaign manager literature that was on your chairs. Those campaign managers make all of our lives easier and make it easier for us to win. And the other thing we need to do to win, to ensure that those campaign managers and all of us, when we're out delivering leaflets and knocking on doors, to make our lives easier, to make their lives easier, is to make sure that as a party, we have a clear, positive vision for our country in the future. And this morning you get a chance to hear from the two contenders, our two brilliant contenders, to be our next leader. And as Ian said, they're not just looking to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, they're looking to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So it's absolutely right that you get a chance to fully assess that and hear directly from them the vision that they have got, an optimistic, outward-looking vision for the future of our country, to show that we in the Conservative family have the answers for our country in the future. So do think about those questions, give them some good questions. I know you will, as you always do in the East Midlands, and have a really good session here for this hustings. Enjoy it and thank you for coming.
Well, before I introduce Boris Johnson to you, let's just watch a campaign video that his team have put together.
Nice to see you. Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Yes, of course you can. If I get in, we'll come out deal or no deal on October the 31st.
Good man, good man.
We'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Would that make you come back and vote Conservative again?
Yes.
That's the spirit.
Yes.
But we've got to have the courage to tell the people of this country that we can do it if we really want to. And that's the only way, actually.
And you're the only person that can do that.
A lot of teachers are telling me that they feel that the funding per pupil isn't high enough. We need more police out there, but sometimes I think we need... And stop and search?
Yes.
Totally with you.
I'm scared. thought I used to live in London as well.
Yeah.
At university.
Safe big city it was when I used to run it. I can tell you we got crime down by 20%, we got the murder rate down.
Like Mr. Cardiff, but it's not good.
But I also think we need to be supporting the wealth creators in the business sector, because otherwise you're not going to have the dosh to invest.
Right.
Cut some taxes and you'll get more money in. Would you normally think of yourself as a Conservative voter, would you say?
No.
No? Ever? Can I ask you a terrible question? Would you consider voting for me?
Yes.
If there is one lesson from that referendum of 2016, it is that too many people feel left behind, that they're not able to take part fully in the opportunities and success of our country. That's why now is the time to unite our society and unite our country, to build the infrastructure, to invest in education, to improve our environment and to support our fantastic NHS, to lift everyone in our country, and of course also to make sure that we support our wealth creators and the businesses that make that investment possible. Now is the time for us to believe in ourselves and what we can do. And that's why I am standing to be leader of the Conservative Party.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Boris Johnson.
Yes, long time no see. How are you? Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming on this wonderful Saturday morning to Nottingham, and great to see you all here. It's fantastic to be here at what is admittedly supposed to be rather a gloomy time for our party, and you'll hear all sorts of people who will prophesy that, they'll point out we got 9% in the recent European Parliament elections. I've never known our party get 9% before, but never mind. They also say, I've heard them say that on the current projections, this is what the Gloomadon poppers say, by the way, that we would lose every single seat in the East Midlands except for Andrea, who would be the designated survivor. I think that is absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. We are going to turn this thing round, my friends. We are going to come back and we are going to win. We are going to win. We're going to make sure we help Ben Bradley win in Mansfield. We're going to make sure Lee Rayleigh wins in North East Derbyshire. And let's hope we get Lee Anderson to win in Ashfield as well. Why not? Why not? We can do it. And I tell you what we need to do. I tell you what we need to do. There are three very simple things we need to do. Number one, we need to get Brexit done. We need to get it over the line by October the 31st. October the 31st. And no ifs, no buts, no more kicking. Kick the can and we kick the bucket, my friends. And it's very simple what we need to do. We need to take the provisions in that otherwise defunct withdrawal agreement, look after the EU nationals, put that into law as we should have done ages ago. The 3.2 million deserve to have their rights protected. I think you will all agree. Number two, take the money, the 39 billion pounds, a higher end, I would suggest, of EU expectations, and suspend it in a state of creative ambiguity over the talks until we get the deal that we need. And then, of course, we should make sure, number three, that we take the questions of the solution of the problems raised by frictionless trade in Northern Ireland and elsewhere, and we remit them for solution in the course of the free trade agreement that we negotiate after we have come out of the EU on October the 31st. Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that the logical place? That's the way to do it. And of course, simultaneously, we encourage our friends and partners to believe in our seriousness of intent by getting ready very thoroughly to come out without an agreement. And that makes sense, doesn't it? If you're going to do a deal, you always make sure that you're able to walk away. We were virtually able, we could have done it on March the 29th, if we decided for political reasons not to do it. We will be ready by October the 31st. We will be ready. This is a great country. We can do it, can't we? Yes, we can. Yes, we can do it. We can. And of course, there are pessimists who will say that, I've read it. I have read it in journals of record, that the planes won't fly and there won't be supplies of clean drinking water. And I think I saw the other day that somebody said that Tesco's wouldn't be able to provide Christmas dinner if in the event of a no-deal Brexit. And the Department for Agriculture said that there'll be such shortages of milk solids and glucose and whey that we wouldn't be able to make the Mars bars on which our children depend. And I have to say that whatever happens, I make this confident prophecy here in Nottingham, my friends, that whatever happens, on whatever terms we leave the EU on October the 31st, the planes will fly, there will be Christmas dinner, there will be supplies of clean drinking water all over the East Midlands. In fact, the floods. There will be supplies of clean drinking water all over the East Midlands, and we will have milk solids and glucose and whey to make our Mars bars, because where there's a will, there's a way, ladies and gentlemen. And then we will get on. Then we will get on with our work. We will get on with our work as a great united Conservative Party in bringing our country together, uniting our party and uniting our country. And I was very proud as Mayor of London to have helped unite that enormous city. And if you remember, I had 4 of the 6 poorest boroughs anywhere in the UK when I began. By the end, I had none of the poorest 20, and we did it by investment in infrastructure, by massively reducing crime, and by lifting aspiration and closing the equality gap, the opportunity gap across the whole city. And that's what we can do in the UK, because there are too many parts of our wonderful country that are left behind. And what we need is to fight crime, and we should back the police. And I've announced some plans for that and help them with stop and search, put more police out on the streets, back them up, level up our education funding. There are too many parts of this country that don't get the education funding they need, particularly in rural areas. Let's level up and give our kids the opportunities they deserve. And number 3, we need to make sure that we do more for transport infrastructure across the whole country. And I want to be the Prime Minister who does for Northern Powerhouse Rail, for Crossrail of the North, what I did for Crossrail, for the West Midlands, what we did for the tube upgrades in London. But of course, here in the East Midlands, there's plenty of things that aren't going right, that need improvement. The dualling of the A46, how about that? Anybody in favour of that? A smatter of applause for that. The Lincoln bypass. My friend Caroline Johnson has fed into my ear just as I came on stage. That is the kind of thing we should be doing. Improving connectivity here. And a final thought. Isn't it an absolute disgrace that in this amazing country we can only provide 7% full fibre broadband? In Spain they have virtually 90%. Let's massively accelerate our programme of full fibre broadband, give every household full fibre broadband, no more manana attitude here in the UK on full fibre. And that is the way. That is the way to get ready. That is the way, and we will pay for it, of course, by supporting the wealth creators and the businesses and the entrepreneurs, the startups of this country. Because we understand the basic symmetry at the heart of the UK economy, that you've got to have a dynamic free market enterprise culture to pay for fantastic infrastructure and healthcare and education and public services. That's our modern conservatism, isn't it? And there's one guy who doesn't understand it. We know who he is. He's Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. And not only does he support Hamas and Hezbollah and the IRA and the Iranians and the mullahs and all the rest of it, but this is a guy who would put up taxes. He would put up taxes on inheritance, on pensions, corporation tax at the highest level in Europe, income tax to 50p in the pound. He would be an absolute economic catastrophe for our country. We cannot let him anywhere near Downing Street, can we? We don't want it, do we? We're going to defeat him. And I would just remind you that the last time I was called upon to defeat an emanation of the London Labour left, considerably wilier and more devious even than, actually particularly than Jeremy Corbyn, in the form of Ken Livingstone. We came from behind and we beat him when our wonderful party, the Conservative Party, was 17 points behind Labour in London. We did it then, we can do it again. We can prick the 2 puffballs of the Liberal Democrats and the Brexit Party, and we can wallop Jeremy Corbyn for 6. With your help, we will. Thank you very much indeed for listening this morning, and I hope I can count on your support. Thank you.
What was it like in Scotland last night facing Jeremy Paxman's bastard son?
I thought you mean Colin. Yes. I thought he was rather nice actually. And he came. We did a long interview afterwards. He seemed to charm. I haven't watched enough of his interviews in England because of course it's all divided up.
It is. Yeah. Right. We're going to have 40 minutes of questions.
But we're going to bring it together. Anyway.
Right. Okay. I'm going to say the first one, and then the second person, just get yourself ready or make yourself known to whoever's got the microphones. Dominic Nancy Keevil, if I pronounced that right, followed by Michael Johnson. Dominic, where are you? Here. And where's Michael? Over there.
Good morning, Boris.
Good morning, sir.
In light of the other candidates' recent comments, can you confirm whether or not you are in favour of fox hunting?
I am emphatically in favour of our wonderful Conservative Party winning the next election, and whenever it comes, and I'm doubtful about the wisdom of escalating this particular issue at this particular juncture. I think that's probably the most tactful thing I can say about that. But you know,
but as a personal view,
well, you know. I've said plenty about it in the past, and I think.
Just remind us what you said in the past.
There are plenty of things. There are plenty of things I've said in the past, and you can consult the internet on that. I think what people want to do is to focus on the things that bring our country together. I am not convinced. The last time I looked, I'm not convinced that particular issue stands out to me as one that is a unifying issue. It doesn't seem to me to have that adhesive quality to it, or cohesive quality.
You're not normally reticent about talking about controversial things.
I think what we need to do now in this country, we've been through a long period of drift and dither and indecision. The country has been very, very divided over the EU and how to come out, whether we should come out. There's been, families have been war. My own family, for heaven's sake. People having all sorts of arguments about this fundamental issue. Do we need at this stage to be slinging another apple of discord, if you know what I mean, into the general national conversation? So what we need to do is bring our country and our party together.
So I'm reading into that actually you probably do agree with fox hunting, but you won't. Do anything to bring it back.
I'm going to leave it entirely to you to make up whatever you like about that. But my genuine view, my friends, folks, is that this is not the one to put on our standard as we go about. This is not.
Okay. Michael Johnson, followed by Jane Halford. Michael's over there. Where's Jane? There.
Michael Johnson. Morning, Boris.
Morning, sir.
I'm pretty certain I'm not related to you, so get that out.
Well, you never know. The BBC did a programme, and I discovered I was related to the most extraordinary people. So
one hopes. Can you prove to me that as well as your great motivational skills, you also have the capacity to be an operational person? Because that's what PM is about.
It is. Thank you very much, cousin Michael, for that question. Look, I mean, I think the answer to that is really contained in my record, both as Mayor of London and as Foreign Secretary. If you look what I did as Mayor of London, nobody thought we could deliver more than 100,000 affordable homes. We did. Nobody thought we could cut crime in the way that we did. We cut crime by, I think, almost 20%. We cut the murder rate in London, Michael, by 50%. And it was very tough to do. And we were, when I began 11 years ago, we were going through a very difficult period. There was a spate of knife crimes, which you will remember. We were losing teenagers to stabbings at the rate of about 30 a year. And it was an absolutely awful time. But we had to bring everybody together. We had to give the police the encouragement and support that they needed to do a very, very difficult and politically controversial programme of stop and search. And they did. And they took 11,000 knives off the streets of London in slightly over a year. And the result was that serious youth violence came down by about 32%. The murder rate came down by 50%, as I say. And you cannot fudge that. You cannot fudge that. And 4 or 5 years, we had the murder rate running at fewer than 100 in a city of 8.5, 9 million. And that was because I had a fantastic team at City Hall and we drove the agenda. We cut delays on the tube. People said, I remember when I first became mayor, people were really moaning about the tube. We cut delays on the tube by 30%. And I look at the record of what we did with poverty and inequality. If you cut the murder rate by 50%, if you cut road traffic fatalities by 50%, which we did too, by the way, and if you cut deaths from fire, then you're doing things that massively benefit, disproportionately benefit the lives of the poorest families in your community, because they will be disproportionately the victims of those tragedies. And I was very proud also of what we did, for instance, with the London living wage, which we massively expanded. And it was a great, I believe in a high wage, low tax economy. That's what we should be going for. The living wage is a great program. I'm proud to say it was nicked by George Osborne in an act of theft I totally condone, and turned into a national policy. I don't want to go on and on about my record, but whenever I've been asked to deliver something, I've always delivered X plus 20 or 30. You look at the Olympics. It wasn't too bad in the end.
It was great. But the accusation behind Michael's question is that you're not a details man, that you have a vision, but not necessarily the details to implement it. Is that fair?
I totally reject that. I mean, yes, I do believe in setting a big and broad agenda. And yes, I think that it's very important to be clear with people about where we're going, and to entrust them with carrying it out. That is vital if you're going to be a successful leader, and that is definitely my approach. But I can do detail as well. Where's the next man? Show me. I've written plenty of books and what have you.
What did you learn though from your 8 years as Mayor of London? What did you learn about yourself? Because you will have learnt a lot, I would have thought, during that time, about things that you're good at and maybe things that you're not quite so good at.
Yeah.
We're interested in the latter.
I think the trouble was, I think too often we were almost painfully shy about publicising our achievements. I think
That's the biggest weakness.
I think that was one of the. I mean, well, I think there were times when we weren't.
Right. Well, let's put it another way.
But actually, there's a serious point contained in all this, which is that I do think that it is the job of a government to lead, and it's the job of a government to set the tone and the direction of a country. And I think for the last few years, to be perfectly honest, we have radiated an air of slight self-doubt and pessimism and defeatism, which has communicated itself to our friends and partners, and needs now to be reversed. So that is my approach.
So apart from that, the 2 years that you spent sitting around the cabinet table as Foreign Secretary,
I thought we were going to give everybody else a chance.
No, we are, but.
I don't mind you.
I do have to press you a little bit sometimes. Just finally, and then we will go on to the next question. What did you learn from the 2 years around the cabinet table when you were sort of looking at what was happening? You thought, well, if I was sitting in the Prime Minister's seat, I would be doing things in a different way.
Really? I think.
How long have we got?
You're going to have, if you've got to have meetings where there's no point in having a meeting that is entirely formulaic and North Korean, and people just sit around the table reciting positions that everybody knows. If you're going to have a discussion with serious senior colleagues, then you've got to allow people to speak their minds, and you've got to have a frank and interesting discussion. We're all dedicated public servants. We want to improve the lives of everybody in our country. Let us speak our minds, and then don't leak it. Don't leak it. It became impossible. It became impossible. The cabinet was entirely ridiculous because, not entirely, it was a fantastic honour to be there, but I'm afraid it was well known. It was well known that at the end of every cabinet there was a certain particular journalist who might as well have been under the table throughout. And that is no way to run a government, and I won't have that if I'm lucky enough to be elected.
So one strike and you're out, is that what you're saying?
Look, it's, what I'm saying is that to get, to build a proper sense of working together and to get the best out of people and to have really good and original ideas about this country, we've got to have people be able to speak their minds frankly without being endlessly leaked against and briefed against.
Right. Jane Halford, followed by William Scott. Jane.
Morning, Boris.
Morning.
How are you going to achieve a leave date of October 31st when the EU won't renegotiate the withdrawal agreement and Parliament won't agree no deal? What is the alternative that can get voted through the House?
Well, don't forget, Janet, that what the official position, the legal position now, is that we must leave by October the 31st unless the British government expressly requests a further extension. So the momentum is on the side of leaving. The legal momentum is on the side of leaving. And it will be really up to Parliament to decide that they wanted to mandate the British Prime Minister by some device that they come up with to force him, it probably will be him, to go for an extension. And I have to say, I mean, I've given the same answer repeatedly throughout this campaign. I genuinely think politics has changed since March the 29th. And I think all our colleagues, and I see loads of my colleagues from Westminster here, we all recognise that we're now staring at extinction. We're looking down the barrel. That Brexit party, those Liberal Democrats, they're both feeding, like twin puffballs, as I say, saprophytically, on the decay of trust in politics. Unless we get Brexit done, we won't recover for a long time. And I think that is the key message. So, people ask me about proroguing and archaic devices like that. I prefer to confide in the maturity and wisdom of our elected representatives. They asked the British people what they wanted to do. The British people returned a convincing answer. Parliament voted overwhelmingly to trigger Article 50. Now let's get on and get it done by October the 31st.
The Chancellor, Philip Hammond, hasn't quite got that message, though, has he?
Well, I'm a great admirer of Phil, but I sat in the cabinet with him when we were all committed to getting ready for no deal. That was, in fact, does anyone remember that? It was actually official Conservative Party policy at the 2017 election. Does anyone remember that one? Didn't go too well, but I mean, it was the right policy and remains the right policy. And I think, to the best of my knowledge, the Chancellor and every other member of the cabinet is still committed to that policy, and quite right.
William Scott, where are you, William?
Sir.
Mr. Johnson, David Cameron's government was probably the most progressive government we've had since the war. He restored our image as a decent party of the centre ground. But since the referendum, we've been seen as a single-issue party. How would you restore our image as a party of the centre ground?
Well, thank you. And I really rather agree with you. And I would just remind you that when I ran London, we did all sorts of progressive things, many of which were actually nicked, as I say, by our friends in the Conservative government when they came in 2010, living wage being among them, and quite right. That was a very progressive idea to put millions of pounds into the pockets of the poorest families in our community. Advancing equalities of all kinds, and when I was mayor, I had more or less a sort of feminocracy actually at the top of City Hall. It was virtually half and half in my top team. I believe profoundly in promoting talented people of both sexes, and we did a huge amount to advance not just equalities but protections of particularly of women against violence, all that kind of thing. We were well ahead of the curve in London. And I would want our party to be doing the same thing. And I was thinking about one issue where we make the running at the moment and where we can be, and where Labour has more or less given up because they know we own it, and that's the environment. And cleaner air, better protection for nature, campaigning against the loss of species around the world, which is such an utter disaster, campaigning against the pollution of our oceans with plastics. These are the things now where the Conservative Party is leading, and we can be incredibly proud of what we're doing. And by the way, to all those who worry about whether this is, a threat to sound Conservative economic policies of growth, on the contrary, we are leaders in battery technology in this country now. One of the great things about the campaign I've been doing in the last few weeks is you see the change in UK industry. We pioneer clean energy technology in a way that I don't think people realise. Wind turbines, batteries, you name it. And that will be generating great jobs for generations to come. And I think we should be presenting ourselves as a party that is committed to social justice in the way that I've described. All the policies that I believe in promote social justice, whether it's fighting crime, building more homes, putting in mass transit systems that enable people on modest incomes to get to a place of work, to the opportunity area. All these things promote social justice, also championing the environment. People will see that our modern Conservative agenda is not only right for the economy, it's deeply progressive as well.
But in that long list of environmental issues, you didn't actually mention climate change. Surely that's the biggest environmental issue.
I talked a lot about clean energy generation, didn't I? I mean, reducing CO2 clearly is the objective.
Okay, just wanted to check.
Okay, but I'm against pollution of all kinds, it goes without saying.
Stephen Lamley, followed by Malcolm Humphreys. Stephen?
Good morning. To update a very old quotation, the influence of the state has increased, is increasing, and ought to be diminished. Do you agree?
Yeah. Well, that was. I think it was called Dunning's law, wasn't it? Dunning's law, as I recall. And yes, I do. And I think that there are ways in which you can roll back the influence of the state. There are ways in which you can, and perhaps the most important is to give people more freedom to spend their own money and give people more freedom to invest and start up their own businesses, do all sorts of things to enable and empower people. And one of the advantages of coming out of the EU, which is not often talked about these days, in fact, we've spent 3 years not even talking about the advantages of coming out of the EU, is that we'll no longer be stuck with this great inherited conglomerate of EU regulation and legislation, which we cannot change. But we'll be able to do things, for instance, with OJU rules, changing the laws on public procurement, that could be a great benefit to UK business. So I do think that the tax burden is very high, the regulatory burden is very high, and it should be our job as Conservatives to be extremely vigilant about both. And you can reduce taxation, certainly, whilst continuing to bear down on the national debt, and we should be doing that as well.
But when you say you want to cut regulation, that frightens the electoral horses, doesn't it? It gives something to the left to feed on, because they would say, oh, you want to reduce standards, you want to reduce workers' rights.
No, not at all. I mean, let me give you an example. I think I had an incredible experience yesterday at the government shipyard for BAE Systems, and unbelievable. You've got young people there on apprenticeships making extraordinary Type 26 frigates, which are going to be sold to Australia, to Canada, sold around the world. And the Australian contract alone is worth 14 billion for our country. Now, currently, OJU processes, the public procurement rules that we have as a result of membership of the European Union, are very onerous. We tend to apply them in a particularly burdensome way, and it might be possible to treat public procurement differently so as to increase our investment in, say, fleet ships, or increase our investment in shipbuilding. And I think that'd be a fantastic thing for our country. It drives high-tech jobs, it drives economic regeneration, and it drives exports as well. And that is at least one area where you could take advantage of new regulatory flexibility to boost the UK economy. And we should treat coming out of the EU not as a threat, not as a plague of boils, but as a massive opportunity to do things differently if we need to, and to turbocharge the advantages of the UK economy. We lead the world in so many sectors.
Malcolm Humphreys, right down the front here, please. And then I'm going to come to the audience, so get your questions ready.
Morning, Boris.
Morning, sir.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for you and your team for ordering your Back Boris lanyards from our manufacturing company here in Nottingham.
There you go.
WePrintLanyards.com. Thank you.
Nottingham lanyards.
That's right. WePrintLanyards.com.
Fantastic.
Anyway.
So we didn't all hear that. Say that again.
WePrintLanyards.com. Thank you. You've both made spending pledges. Could you explain how this will be funded? Or are you planning on using Labour's magic money trick?
No, absolutely not. No, I've said what I've said. We will continue to bear down on debt. We will continue to reduce debt. But thanks to the hard work of the British people and the fiscal prudence, both of George and of Philip Hammond, there is now headroom. As everybody knows, there's about £26 billion of headroom. I won't make any comparison with any other campaign at the moment, but my spending pledges are the lowest currently on offer. We're not blowing. I think irresponsible sums, but it is right to invest in education now. I don't know what you feel, but I do feel schools around the country deserve an uplift, and the discrepancy has been allowed to grow too big. I do think we can do things. I do think we need to get more police out on the beat, and we should be supporting that. And we must also be very careful that the police use the funds to support frontline policing. Just as we must be very careful that the £20 billion we put into the NHS actually gets to doctors and nurses. So all that I have announced has in fact been extremely carefully costed, and we're not even butting up against the top of the headroom.
But the headroom has been revised down to 15 billion this week, hasn't it?
Well, I don't even know. Even then, I don't think our head is still well clear of the ceiling of the headroom, if you see what I mean. So the cash is there is cash there. I think most people in this country feel that it is wise and prudent now to put some money into education, into policing, and into improving our infrastructure. And if we can't have better broadband quicker, then what kind of a country are we? We helped invent the world.
But that's 9 billion straight off on the broadband promise, isn't it?
No.
What is it then?
Well, I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to go into
it. I mean,
the figure I've seen, I rely on my friend, the member for Newark. Where is he? The brilliant Robert, who I think I've seen a figure of about 3 billion. So, but we've got to do it. We've got to do it. Is it really right that so many towns in this city are staring at the pizza wheel of doom, whereas in villages in Andalusia they have speed of light access to the internet? It's ridiculous. This is the 5th greatest economy in the world. We should be getting on with it.
So just list for me the firm spending promises that you've made, not the aspirational ones, the firm ones.
I'm going to leave that to you. I think I've made pledges on education, on
so that's 4 billion,
and on
the police 1 billion, broadband. Well, you say 3, I say 9. Tax cuts.
Well,
if you want to do your tax cut, that's another 9 billion, isn't it? I mean, it's ratcheting up.
It depends what the effect is, what the fiscal impact would be. And you asked about spending commitments, not tax cuts. If you look at the there are some tax cuts that you can make, as everybody knows, that actually increase yield. As the great Tunisian sage Ibn Khaldun pointed out in the 14th century, after looking at taxes on dates or olives or something, he worked out that actually if you cut the taxes on the date harvest, people grew more dates, and then the yield of taxes increased. And that has certainly been the case with corporation tax and other taxes. And I dare say it would be true of stamp duty, land tax as well. There are some taxes that are, in my view, are not well balanced, and they repay examination.
Right, we need a bit of balance in this room, so I'm going to ask some questions from this side of the room because we haven't. I've got my back to you, which I do apologise for. Right, lady on the end of the road there, and then a gentleman who's just standing up at the back there. Right, let's get the microphone to him. And then someone, third one, lady, third row here.
Do I just talk? Lucy Eperon. I'm a scientist. How will the UK become a leader in controlling the other driver of the environmental crisis, the global population explosion? In the UK, this drives pollution, congestion, overcrowding in schools and hospitals, housing shortage, and loss of farmland and the countryside habitat. How do you propose to have a conversation about the global population problem?
Well, Lucy, thank you. That's a brilliant. I mean, that's a great. And, that's the kind of question. Did you say your name was Eperol? Well, thank you so much for that question, because we should be talking about that, and we should have no. But there are several answers. First of all, we shouldn't be terrified of growing population here in this country and its impact on the environment necessarily. London's population grew when I was mayor by about 200,000. No thanks to me, but it just did. And the GDP also grew. GDP also grew massively. And yet we reduced CO2 by 14%. CO2 emissions came down, to get to your point about climate. We reduced CO2 emissions. We cut NOx and particulate pollution as well, 20% and 16% respectively. And this was all through new technology. But you ask a much wider and more profound question, which is, what should we in the UK be doing about what is happening to the planet? And this is, I think, I get in terrible trouble. I used to get in terrible trouble when I talked about this in the FCA, one of the many things that people thought I should mention. But it is germane. If you look at what is happening in sub-Saharan Africa, where the population is it's going to be 2.4 billion by 2050. The population of Egypt probably heading for well north of 200. Pakistan, ditto. There is a population boom going on in some parts of the world. Some places it's going the other direction. Japan, the Western Balkans, it's moving in a different direction. Now, the destruction of habitat and the environmental consequences, and indeed the political instability that is caused, and the migratory flows that are generated by these massive population growths in South Asia and in Africa, are of huge consequence to our world. And we do need to think about them. Now, of course, every country must develop as it chooses, and everybody must be entitled to an aspiration, and all nations deserve to grow and to seek their destiny. That's entirely right. But one thing I noticed as Foreign Secretary about the countries where they had particularly rapid population growth, they were invariably places where education was substandard, and particularly where the education of girls was not being pursued in the way it should. And if you look at parts of sub-Saharan Africa, you have illiteracy running at 60, 70, 80% amongst girls and young women. Now that is a disaster. That is an absolute disaster. In Pakistan, about 60% of adult women are illiterate. Now, no wonder these countries are facing the challenges that they do. And if you ask what the UK should be doing, it should be stepping up what we already do, which is boosting female education around the world. 12 years of quality education for every girl. 12 years of quality education for every girl. That is the answer. And empower women. Empower women and give 12 years of quality education to every girl in the world, and you will solve, Lucy, you will solve most of the political problems of the world, but you will also solve most of the problems of unbalanced and unbalanced development. So that's, I really think that of all the policies that I came across in the last 20 years, that comes the closest to being a magic bullet. I really do.
Okay. Right, thank you over there. And then here.
Hi, Boris. Hi, Rob Goff. This is my daughter, Matilda. She came 10 weeks early, so she had a bit of a time being looked after by neonatal care, and had fantastic care from Gossip Ward at Northampton General Hospital. Fantastic staff there. But obviously she had a great load of care while that was going on, but my wife and I, obviously my wife had to start her maternity leave early, so she didn't have that time, 10 weeks, where she was able to bond with the baby.
Oh, no.
I had to carry on going to work pretty much for that whole period. Fortunately, I didn't work too far from the hospital, so it wasn't too much of a problem, but I did see people that had to go off sick so they could actually spend time with their baby. So I was wanting to see what you would do to improve the sort of paternity and maternity rights for those parents with premature babies who don't get a chance to really bond with their babies while they're in incubators and being basically heavily looked after, while parents just haven't got that chance.
Sorry, thank you. Welcome, Matilda, to our meeting. Matilda, I think Matilda is one of the best behaved members of the audience I've seen, actually.
I'm sure she'd love one of your buses as well, Boris.
Thank you. Say again?
I'm sure she'd love one of your buses as well, Boris.
Oh, yeah, well, they take a very long time to make, but I'm happy. I don't have much spare time at the moment. But seriously, your question is a very, very important one. It really is. And I think that as a party and as a government, the whole issue of child care and early years is central to our economic success. We have to get it right. I don't think that we are getting it right yet as a country. I think it is still too difficult for mothers in particular to access good childcare, but of course it goes for fathers as well. And you should, I mean, when it comes to time off from work to look after a newborn, there is statute already in place. I mean, it's much more progressive than it used to be. So you should, I mean, my understanding is that there should be paternity leave, isn't there?
There is. But, I mean, Theresa May announced a few weeks ago that she wanted to increase paternity leave. I can't remember exactly what it was to, but I think it was something like, it was quite a few months.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much in favour of that. All I would say is, you've got to make sure that as you do these things, that you don't place an unnecessary and unexpected burden on companies. But people will get used to it, and that's got to be the way forward. And things have changed in the last 20, 30 years, but that's all to the good. And I think that it's obviously a very, very good idea for you and Matilda to spend time together. And I'm delighted that Matilda has been able to attend this historic leadership hustings in Nottingham. And what could be more conducive to her well-being than to be attended by these benevolent spirits here today.
Can you just clear up something? When you said about that you made buses, a lot of people thought you'd made it up. But I know I met somebody who used to work for you who told me, no, it is absolutely true. He does. Why do you think people thought that you made that up?
Well, I don't know. They couldn't imagine what it would look like. But I think they're not really terribly good. I've got to. What they are. What you do? Do you want to go over this again? I mean, I thought, don't people have some serious questions about? Okay, well, if you suppose you get one of those crates of wine, right? That has 2 bottles in it. Somebody gives you a present.
Mateus Rosé.
Yeah, whatever. and you drink the wine, right? And then you have the crate left, beautiful wooden crates. And what I like to do is, because they have a division, and you use the division as the upper deck, and then you populate the upper deck with figurines that you all be with. I'm getting myself into more trouble here, aren't I? And then you paint them, and then you paint the whole thing red, and then I get little plastic wheels and shove them on it, and you got a bus, and they all look terribly happy. That's my and of course they are, because they're on one of the wonderful new low carbon Route Master style buses that we've put on Central London, with which of course we not only ferried people around in ever growing numbers, but with which we cut CO2 as I never tell, and cut NOx and cut pollution generally. And it goes back to my general thesis about this country and technological optimism. We can be the green leaders. We can lead in green technology. We can create fantastic jobs for our kids in the future, but we can also improve our environment. So if you want a vision for Britain, it's the greatest place to be, the greatest place to bring up a family, send your kids to school, but also the place where we take the most care over our environment, in the knowledge that the innovations that we're introducing are helping to drive economic growth, high-wage jobs of all kinds. That should be the way forward for the country.
And do they all have a different slogan along the side?
They do, but if you're referring to the historic bus of truth, if you're referring, which we drove, the bus of truth which we sent up the cul-de-sac of apathy, I can't remember how I'm going to conclude.
Right, should we move on? Should we move on? Right, lady there.
How do I turn? Oh, it's on.
It's on.
Well, moving swiftly on, I'd like to... Good morning, just.
Good morning.
My name is Jenny Wheeldon. I have been a very successful head teacher in Lincolnshire.
Fantastic.
And the question I would like to ask, you say you're going to pledge more money to education, which is absolutely right and proper. But how will you ensure that that money actually raises standards and improves education in our primary schools and improves the quality of life of our teachers, both recruitment and retention, and stops the fat cats of our CEOs in academy trusts creaming off vast sums of money at the cost of our pupils?
I so agree with that. There's only, Jenny, there's only one thing, you're totally right, and I noticed it, I mean, it was so depressing, almost immediately after the whole academy trust system started. I started, 2 or 3 years later, I started to hear stories about people ripping the thing off and teams getting together to make money at the expense of the taxpayer. It is deeply depressing. We must root it out. The best answer everywhere and always with education is, I'm afraid, in the quality and leadership provided by the head. And I thank you very much for what you... Are you in a grammar school or not?
I was in a primary school, outstanding primary school. I was
Yeah.
there for 20 years.
It's all about the teachers. It's all about, and particularly about the head teachers, it's all about leadership. And we need to be finding ways of supporting good head teachers, backing them up, championing what they do. But I also feel, and this is where I may be straying off the path of political correctness again, but I also feel that academic competition is a good thing. And I think that although it can be very painful for kids sometimes to feel that they're judged against their peers and to feel that they haven't succeeded, and we all know that, and we all feel the pain of our kids, and everybody wants our kids to succeed, you've got to have that basic utensil of academic competition. And that should be at the heart of what we Conservatives are willing to support. So I would say great teachers with obviously making sure they look after every kid in the school, but also making sure that there's a lively spirit of competition and success in the school. And we shouldn't be embarrassed about that. I remember schools in the London Borough of Islington, where I used to live, where I turned up literally at a sports day, where nobody was allowed to win a race because it was thought to be too judgmental or whatever. That's no good. It certainly wouldn't work in a Conservative leadership context anyway.
You could have a joint leadership. How about that?
I know. Well...
Right, final question. We've got a group of young Conservatives at the back there. I want to take one chap with his arm right ramrod up in the middle, at the back row. Yeah.
Morning, Mr. Johnson.
Sir.
So you said there were plenty of things you said in the past. Thinking back to some of these comments, do you believe that you'd be a fitting Prime Minister for everyone? including minority groups, in such a diverse country as this, having made such derogatory and arguably racist comments in the past, such as, for example, about women wearing the burqa?
Well, thank you thank you very much for raising that, and we've got to raise these questions. Actually, if you look at that article, which I don't know if anybody did, it was a strong liberal defence of the right of women to wear the burqa. And I can tell you, I received many letters of support from, particularly from women, but also from some imams who thought I was on the right side of that particular argument. And I speak as, by the way, as the proud great-grandson of a Muslim immigrant who came for some reason to Wimbledon in 1912 because he thought that this was a fantastic open country, a beacon for democracy and generosity. That was why he came to Britain. He then went back to Turkey and got assassinated, unfortunately. But he saw this. He saw this country. He saw this country as a wonderful place to come, and he thought that it had something special about it and something magic about it, and it does. And I think we Conservatives should be protecting that and making sure that it continues to have that feeling for everybody who lives here. And I was very proud as Mayor of London to be leading the city that I think is the most diverse on earth. And what we want is a modern British culture in which we value each other, in which we respect each other, and which we, I think tolerate is too feeble a word. Love, thank you very much. We love each other in a Christian spirit or in a non-Christian spirit or whatever. That should be our general approach, and I think the British people get it. They totally get it, and that's what we should radiate for the modern Conservative Party, and I think we do. And it's changing, and it's changed, and it has changed and continues to change, and gets better in my view the whole time. So I think we can be very proud of the changes we've seen in the Tory Party over the last 20 years. We've got to continue to push it forward.
Final quick question for me. You're very good at making people laugh. We've seen it again this morning. What makes you laugh?
Oh, very easy. Well, no, he doesn't know, because I'm genuinely worried that well, what makes me laugh? I almost anything involving, yes, the Pink Panther. I have to admit, I think it was incredibly funny.
Really?
Yeah, it's fantastically funny. I almost retch with laughter when watching the Pink Panther. I think Dodgeball. Have you watched Dodgeball? Brilliant movie. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't make me laugh. We shouldn't laugh at him, because he's in fact a deeply sinister guy. And there was a wonderful expose this morning of some of the things he'd said about the IRA, the support he gave to the Brighton bombers just days after they'd murdered innocent people, innocent members of our party. He welcomed them into Westminster. The things he said in support of some of the most hideous regimes around the world. He's still backing Maduro in Venezuela. He stands up for Moscow rather than the government of the United Kingdom when it comes to the poisonings in Salisbury. We cannot let him into power. I just get back to the main theme and purpose of our meeting here this morning. We cannot let him in. We're a great party. We're going to get this Brexit thing done. It's going to be a great success. We're going to recover belief in our country and ourselves. And we're going to, as I say, we're going to hit Jeremy Corbyn well over the gasometer.
Ladies and gentlemen, Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, before we meet our candidate number 2, let's just watch a short video from Jeremy Hunt's campaign team.
The most striking quality about Jeremy Hunt was his unwavering commitment to get results. I think perhaps part of that is to do with his background in business. No matter what the obstacles were, he was prepared to push through them. He wanted to get results.
I've seen him deliver on the things that matter most to the British people. He has credibility from all sides. I trust him on Brexit.
I've known Jeremy for 40 years, and about 25 of those years we've worked together, setting up various businesses. Those early days were absolutely about his determination and grit. He would never give up.
When I first met Jeremy, I realised he was a man who actually was committed to making a difference.
In 2008, I lost my baby son Joshua as a consequence of serious failures in his care during my campaign to kind of uncover the truth about what happened. I was struggling to be heard. Jeremy really listened and treated me as a grieving dad rather than a troublemaker. I knew that this was somebody who was going to change things.
My mum died quite tragically from poor care in mid-Staffs. Jeremy was incredibly kind. He saw the bereaved daughter behind the campaigner and he saw the people that mattered.
I have known Jeremy Hunt since the early 2000s. He and his business partner started funding the education of children living with HIV in our community-based programme. Jeremy's generosity was sensed by us all.
That desire to make a difference really drives him. It's never been about him. It's always been about what he can do to help others.
The work he's done will save the lives of countless babies, and other families will not have to go through the kind of pain that we did.
People often underestimate Jeremy because he comes across as being such a polite and generous and nice person, and he is. But I remember hearing him warning the EU not to mistake British politeness for British weakness, and I thought that just about sums him up.
I was pessimistic about the London Olympics. I thought, we could mess this up. I remember talking to Jeremy in the build-up. He said, no, we're a great country. We can do this if we have the right mindset. The delivery was outstanding. It also had this element of fun. I know that Jeremy was very involved in getting that balance right.
He believes in Britain as a force for good in the world. He's shown strong values at the FCO and consistently good judgment.
Negotiating, toughing it out when things get really difficult, keeping going, having a vision. Those are the skills that we need in a Prime Minister.
He's a unifier. He's somebody who can reach out to different groups of people.
My dad always taught me that politics should be about making a difference in ordinary people's lives. And Jeremy made a huge difference to our lives. He gave us hope, and that for me was the main thing, that he gave us hope in some very, very dark days.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jeremy Hunt.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've heard it's 90 degrees in here, so thank you for welcoming me to tropical Nottingham and your very own monsoon in the East Midlands. Boris and I have been following each other around the country. I think we could probably do each other's speeches. And if we did that, I would just advise him to check the nationality of his other half very carefully. I don't think she's Chinese or Japanese, but he's not the only one capable of very embarrassing gaffes, and that's something we share as Foreign Secretary. I am here as someone who wants to tell you what I want to change as our Prime Minister. And to govern is to choose, and I've got 4 priorities, and I want to tell you those priorities in a moment. But we can't do any of those until we've delivered Brexit. And when it comes to no deal, there isn't a huge difference between me and Boris. We both want a deal. We're both prepared to leave without a deal if that's the way we have to leave the European Union. The difference is which is the Prime Minister that we think has got the best chance of negotiating a deal. And if you choose me, I'll be the first Prime Minister we've ever had who has a background as an entrepreneur.
Now, I want to do something that I've done in every single hustings, which is just ask you to put up your hands if you set up your own business. Just put up your hands. Just look around. That is why the Conservative Party is so bloody brilliant. We are the doers. And what is it that entrepreneurs do every single day of their working life? They negotiate. And negotiators have to know not to blink. They have to be prepared to walk away. They have to earn the trust of the other side, because no one does a deal with someone they don't trust. And getting that deal, that's what I'm going to do as our Prime Minister. And when I do that, there is so much excitement for our amazing country. And let me tell you my 4 priorities. First of all, as someone who set up their own business, I want to fire up our economy to be the most pro-growth, pro-enterprise, greenest, high-tech, pro-business economy in Europe. And we've got in our country the best universities in Europe, some of the very best in the world. We've got more technology entrepreneurs, more medicines being developed. And our opportunity is to be the world's next Silicon Valley. And at the start of the 21st century, that would set this country up. And you know that in Nottingham, you've got 2 fantastic universities here. This is the first 1 gigabit city in the East Midlands. And I'm going to take a giant step towards that by cutting corporation tax radically to just 12.5%. And I'm going to take many high street businesses out of business rates as well, because I want to land an economic jumbo jet on Europe's doorstep, so that when it comes to those trade negotiations, they need us every bit as much as we need them. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm the Foreign Secretary, son of a naval officer. I want our country to walk tall in the world. Thanks to the service of my dad's generation, we won the Cold War. We never took peace for granted, and we never will under me as Prime Minister. So I've said I will increase the proportion of our GDP that we spend on defence, partly because of the increase in aggression from countries like Russia, but also because at the point of Brexit, I want the world to know that Britain, that extraordinary country that has always stood up for democratic values, always understood the security that you need to underpin those values, I want the world to know that Britain's voice is strong, we're back, we're here, we're not going anywhere, and we will always champion our values. And then, number 3, I'd be the first Prime Minister who has ever run our NHS. And I've always believed that we Conservatives need to have a social mission and not just an economic mission. You saw all those hands go up. People know that we understand wealth creation, but they need to understand our values as compassionate Conservatives as well. And I want our social mission to be education. Still, despite the tremendous reforms we've done, nearly a quarter of our primary school leavers can't read or write properly. And I want us to be the Conservative government that abolishes the scourge of illiteracy in our society, because we're the party of opportunity. We put ladders in front of every single person as they start out on their life, no matter what their background. If they climb that ladder or not, it's up to them. But we're the party that's going to put that ladder there and make sure everyone in our society has amazing opportunities. And that's the 3rd thing that I'm going to do. And then number 4, this is a political promise. I promise you that I will not take our party into a general election until we've got more young people to vote Conservative. We cannot be the party of aspiration if the most aspirational people in our country don't support us. And I want to do it for that reason, but also for another reason, because attracting young people was the heart of Corbyn's success at the last election. And we must not ignore the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, the most ruthless, dangerous, anti-British, anti-Western, hard-left cabal this country has ever seen, and we mustn't let them near Downing Street. So friends, get this wrong, and there will be no Conservative government, no Brexit, maybe even no Conservative Party. But get it right, and we will deliver Brexit, unite our party, unleash the incredible potential of our country, and send Corbyn packing. Let me show you how. Thank you very much.
Right, the first two questions, Ian Henry and Tom Williams. Ian, where are you? Right, over there. And Tom, where are you? Over here.
Mr. Hunt, good morning. Ian Henry, I'm from rural Northamptonshire. Why do you think it is that the entire panoply of the Remain leading media, both broadcast and print, are supporting you for a Brexit exit?
Sorry.
Let me
Have you got the question
let
there?
me read it out. Why do you think it is that the entire panoply of the Remainer-leaning media, both broadcast and print, are supporting you for a Brexit exit from the EU? Do they know something we as members don't?
Well, I wish the whole media was supporting me, but but they're not. And the truth is that all of us, if we start looking at people as Brexiteers and Remainers, we will never unite our party, we'll never unite our MPs, and we'll never get Brexit through the House of Commons. And I am someone who will unify our parliamentary party, but most importantly, I want to unify our country after Brexit. And the way that we'll do that is not by delaying Brexit, not by trying to stop Brexit, not by trying to dodge it with a second referendum. We have to deliver the Brexit that our country voted for, but show the 48% afterwards that it is not going to change the fundamental character of our country as one of the most open, internationally minded, outward-looking, tolerant countries on the planet. That's a great thing about our country, and that is never going to change under our Conservative Brexit.
How can you unite the parliamentary party, though? You got 77 votes out of 313. A very small percentage of your supporters came from the Brexit side of the argument, whereas your opponent got, what was it, 160-something, and actually he has got quite a balance of Leave and Remain supporters.
By the way, and I think you're the person who could have delivered both mine and Boris's speeches, because you've been listening to them very, very faithfully. Look, about half the parliamentary party voted for the Frontrunner, and about half the parliamentary party didn't. And what we need, whoever wins, is someone who brings both sides of the parliamentary party together. And one of the reasons that Theresa May, who you will never hear me criticise because she has a tremendous sense of duty and she tried incredibly hard for our party and our country. But one of the reasons that she had difficulty is that, unfortunately, the EU stopped believing that the British government could deliver Parliament, and so they stopped wanting to make concessions. So in my negotiating team, I will have the DUP, the ERG, Scottish Conservatives, Welsh Conservatives, so that the EU will see that any offer we make as the British government, we can deliver through Parliament.
Right, Tom Williams, followed by Rami Ghanem. When you get the microphone, please do hold it right up to your mouth, not down here somewhere.
Is that working?
Yes.
Good, excellent. Tom Williams, Orpington Conservative Association, and a Leave voter. Jeremy, you may remember Black Wednesday in 1992 when Britain crashed out of the European exchange rate mechanism. That event destroyed our reputation for economic competence and contributed directly to the Blair landslide of 1997. How exactly do you propose to win an election off the back of a no-deal Brexit, given that the consequences of that would be more serious and longer lasting than Black Wednesday?
Well, Tom, that is exactly why you should never underestimate the risks of a no-deal Brexit. But I would say this, it's not my first choice, but if that is the way that we have to leave, then we must. Because when I go around the world, what I notice is that other countries have a whole lot more respect for us than we sometimes seem to have for ourselves. And at the heart of that respect is the fact that we are one of the oldest and most robust democracies in the world, where people like me do what people like you tell us to do. That's the way it has to be. And so what we have to do, if it does end up being a no-deal Brexit, is to show that we're properly prepared. I announced this week some detailed plans, £20 billion of support. That corporation tax cut I talked about is going to help businesses weather that storm, but we're going to need even more specific support for farmers. If you suddenly get a 40% tariff on your lamb exports to the EU, a steel ball manufacturer I met in Kidderminster who said he's going to get an 11% tariff on his exports to the EU, where he has currently half the European market. So they need support and help, and as the party of business, we'll make sure they get it.
Right, Rami, where are you? Rami Ghanem?
Mr. Hunt.
One second, followed by Drew Smith.
Okay. In the last general election, we saw Labour make the arguments against capitalism and for socialism. We as a party, we didn't make those arguments correctly in the 2017 election. So how will you make the case for capitalism at the next general election?
Well, thank you for asking that absolutely brilliant question. And as someone who set out on their own in their 20s, I feel passionately that we need to encourage risk takers and wealth creators, because they create the jobs on which all of our prosperity depends. And I want to make the argument that I don't think we've been making loud enough, that for young people like you, the party of opportunity is the party that, against all the odds, has created 1,000 jobs every single day that we've been in office since 2010. That is a huge achievement. And I'll tell people something else. As Health Secretary, I had my battles. I was there for nearly 6 years. But the very last thing I did was to negotiate the biggest ever funding increase for our NHS, a funding increase amounting to nearly 1% of our GDP. And I did that because we took tough decisions in 2010 to put the economy back on its feet. And that shows if you want strong public services, it has to be a Conservative government.
Someone told me once that you used to be an entrepreneur.
I might use that line, actually, Ian, because
happy
I think it's got a nice ring to it.
Right, Drew Smith, then Andrew Mayer. Drew.
Thank you very much. Drew Smith, Deputy Chairman Political of Bassett Law, just up the road. In 2017, we Conservatives turned Bassett Law from being a safe Labour seat to a key marginal. My question to you is, under your leadership, how do we fight Brexit-supporting Labour MPs in marginal seats like Bassett Law?
Thank you, Drew. If you choose me, I'll be the first Prime Minister in half a century who has won a marginal seat. When I took over as PPC in South West Surrey, we had a majority of just 861, and now it's over 20,000. And I know what it's like to knock on every door, to need every single vote. I need every single vote right now, guys. I'm looking at you. And the way that we're going to fight off the Brexit Party is very simple. We're going to Brexit. There is no fighting off the Brexit Party without Brexit. But we also have to remember that we're going to need to win votes on the centre ground who will go to the Lib Dems and the Labour Party if we're going to win key marginals like Bassett Law, like Lincoln. We need Broxtowe to be Conservative as well, by the way. And so once we have delivered Brexit, we need to be that modern centre-ground Conservative Party that occupies the part of British politics from where you win elections. And that's what we did in 2015, and that's what I'll make sure we do again.
I think, and Drew can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think what lay behind his question was the fact that Boris Johnson is seen as much more sort of hardline pro-Brexit and might go down better in Bassett Law than somebody who perhaps isn't seen as quite so hardline. Am I right? Yeah. Yes.
Well, let me address that head on. You know, if we have an election before we've delivered Brexit, it doesn't matter who our leader is, we will be toast. And that is the simple fact of the matter. If you look at what happened in the Peterborough by-election, the local elections, the European elections, will get squeezed by the Brexit Party on the right, the Lib Dems on the left. Who's going to come through the middle? It's the Labour Party. And the one thing that Jeremy Corbyn will never, ever do is deliver Brexit. And that's why we must deliver Brexit before we have a general election.
Andrew Mayer, followed by Jordan Kiss. Andrew.
Over here.
Oh, he's over here. Right.
On the side. What do you intend to do to improve permanent employment opportunities for physically disabled people?
Well, Andrew, that has to be a very important part of our mission if we are going to be the party of the whole country. I was Shadow Minister for Disabled People, and some of the most inspiring people I've ever met are the parents of disabled children who've had their lives turned upside down, and the love that you see in those families is absolutely extraordinary. So what do I want to see? I want to see us supporting projects like a project that I saw in the NHS, which encouraged hospitals to give work experience to a young disabled person for a fixed period of time, and after that work experience, maybe 6 months, allow them to apply for a job in that hospital on exactly the same basis as people who weren't disabled, but with the hospital knowing a little bit about that person and their skills and their talents. And do you know what they found? They found that if that happened, the disabled person got that job, and not only that, but they stayed in that job for longer than other people would have, and they became part of that hospital's family. And I think that's a kind of great initiative that shows the country the kind of values that we have as Conservatives.
Jordan Kiss, followed by Henry Beale, then it's open to the floor. Where are you, Jordan?
Good morning, Jeremy. Under 18s and even 15-year-olds will vote in this leadership election, which ultimately will elect the next Prime Minister. Will you let them vote in a general election? And if not, do you deserve their vote in a leadership election?
Thank you, Jordan. I've noticed your T-shirt, and I'll get you a Has to Be Hunt one as well. We have different rules for our party than the rules we have for the country. You know, one of the things that I've been most excited about is the fact that we've had so many young people coming to our hustings, and that has shown a new face for the Conservative Party to the world. And I have been talking a lot about how we get more young people supporting us. And I think there's lots we can do. But I'm not in favour of changing the voting age. You asked a straight question, I'll give you a straight answer. We have lots of cut-off points for different moments, for when you can drive, when you can get married, when you can do other things that we don't talk about with a family audience. And I happen to think that the age we've got for the voting age is right. But what I do think is that we need to do a lot more to get young people involved in politics younger, and in particular, we need to make sure that in our universities, we do not have the chilling effect of people who are conservative feeling they can't speak out for fear of harassment or intimidation.
But how can it be right for Jordan, as a 15-year-old, which I'm assuming he is from the question, how can it be right for him to vote for the next Prime Minister but can't vote in the next election if it comes up in 6 months?
Because what is right for the Conservative Party, and I don't know who sets these rules, but what is right for the Conservative Party as a political party is not necessarily what is right for the country as a whole. And I think that I'm very in favour of young people being involved, but I think the voting age is right as it is now.
Okay. Right, Henry Beale, and then we will go to questions from the floor. Where's Henry? Oh, I thought it was over here. Right, okay, he's there.
Good morning, good afternoon, Jeremy. Prosecution for personal use of drugs disproportionately affects people from BAME and poorer backgrounds. Will you support updating Britain's drug laws in order to consider drug misuse a public health rather than a criminal issue?
Well, very, very good question. I do think misuse of drugs is a health issue, but I think sometimes it has to be a criminal issue as well. And I'm always happy to look at all the international evidence as to what works and what doesn't work, but our priority must be fewer young people using drugs. And my worry is that some of the changes that are proposed and debated might actually lead to more young people using drugs. And as Health Secretary, sorry, there's a lectern between us, which is why I'm crouching my neck to see you. But my worry is particularly the link between cannabis use and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And so that's why I think we have to be careful about changes that provoke that.
Right, who would like to ask a question? Lady right at the back there, and then the gentleman down the front here.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to ask, as a person who started up their own business under the Conservatives and now employs over 200 people, so I'd like to thank the Conservatives for that. What specifically are you going to do to help me employ the next 200 people?
Okay, thank you. And what's your name, by the way?
Sorry, it's Melanie Baker.
I didn't?
Melanie Baker.
Melanie. Well, Melanie, that was the size that my business got to. And then I got lured into politics. So that's why I'm borrowing other people's helicopters to fly around the country on this leadership campaign. But we need to back people like you. And one of the things that I would like to change is a cultural thing with the entrepreneurs in this country, where very often they do, frankly, what I did, which is they got their business to a certain size and then they sell out. Whereas in America, the job's not done until you're the biggest business in the world in what you do. And I think we need to be encouraging people to reach for the stars in every way possible. But we have the best entrepreneurial culture in Europe, and we have one of the best in the world. What would I do? I would look at what President Trump did. Don't agree with him on everything, but he introduced some very important business tax cuts. He has increased American GDP growth to over 3%. That's double what we're doing. That's why I've said I want this radical cut to corporation tax. Now, if we manage to get American levels of growth, we'd have an extra £20 billion to spend on precious public services or tax cuts. So that's why I think cutting taxes on business is the thing that makes everything else possible, making the size of the cake bigger. And that's what I think we should start by doing.
Why did you leave your business to go into politics? Because you said it was a marginal seat when you were selected for it. What drove that decision?
Well, I always had this little corner of my heart that thought I might like to go into politics. And then I'd set up my business. It was going pretty well. And my local seat came up. And I didn't want to win it because it was a highly marginal seat. But I thought, because I've got a local connection, they're bound to give me an interview. It'll be really good interview practice. And then to my absolute horror, I went and won it. And I had a battle for 2.5 years, a really gladiatorial battle with a very, very strong Lib Dem opponent. And, you know, thankfully, we smashed it. I had a brilliant team of people in southwest Surrey. So I ended up going to politics a bit sooner than I thought. But as a backbench MP, I was able to carry on running the business for 5 years before we came into government in 2010.
I can remember you phoned me when I was a candidate at that time. You said, Ian, you're running a brilliant campaign. How are you doing it? You won and I lost by 10,000. What might have been, eh?
Yes.
Right,
yes.
Gentleman down the front here and then lady there.
Hi, Jeremy. You mentioned at the start that we need to attract younger people into the Conservative Party. And one of the issues that does affect younger people is the housing market. So I would like to know what your plans are to get younger people onto the housing ladder. And also, as a member of Boxer Conservatives, I'd like to thank you for your mention of making sure we do return a Conservative candidate in whenever the election may be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What's your name? So, what's your name? Ian. Lee. Well, Lee, great question. So what do we do for young people? Housing, let's be honest, it is much, much harder for younger people to get on the housing ladder today than it was for our generation all those years ago. I actually did the sums, and when I bought my first flat in Barons Court in London in my late 20s, since then the incomes of people in their 20s has gone up by 20%, but house prices have nearly tripled. So it is much, much harder. And Margaret Thatcher had a plan to put, that allowed 1.5 million council tenants onto the housing ladder through her right to buy scheme. That incidentally created a lot of Conservative voters as people began to understand our values. And I've got a scheme called Right to Own, which will help 1.5 million young people who can't afford a mortgage or a deposit to get onto the housing ladder by gifting them land that already has planning permission, so that the only thing that you have to fund is the cost of building the house. And I think it's a plan that is potentially very exciting. But the only other thing I'd say is to win over young people, it's about aspiration, but it's also about values. And I think for young people, the litmus test of whether we share their values is whether they see a Conservative Party that is going to do the right thing for the planet, conserve the planet as part of our values. And so I think it's also very important that we show that we are ahead of the climate change debate.
But you've answered two questions today, one over here and one over there, where I would reckon probably 80% of young people think the voting age should be brought down, and probably 80% of young people think the drug laws need reforming, and yet you don't agree with either of those. Given that, it's difficult for you to say, well, I can inspire young people, surely.
I don't think young people want someone who is going to agree with them on everything. They want someone who tells the truth as they see it, but they want someone who is actually going to do things to help young people. Now, what have I said I'll do for young people? We talked about housing, we talked about climate change. I've also said that we need to do something about the thing most young people think is shockingly unfair about the new tuition fee arrangement, which is not the principle of those reforms, which I defend, but 6% interest rates. You know, I cannot justify that on the doorstep, and I think that risks discrediting some very important reforms. So I think a Prime Minister who deals with those issues that people care about and prioritises it, that's the way we're going to win them back.
Right, lady there, and then the lady here.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm a student at the University of Lincoln. One of the greatest strengths, I feel, of our party is that we're a broad church. The idea that so many of us in here will disagree on some quite big issues, but we're all held together by those core conservative principles. Now, I'm sure that you'll be aware of the, in my opinion, vile campaign that Leave.eu is running against some of your colleagues, such as David Gauke and Sam Gyimah, and that one of the ringleaders against David Gauke is actually currently in the selection process to stand against him for the Brexit Party. And I think, do you agree with me that if we are going to survive as a party, we need to not take the lessons of the Labour Party and welcome in extremists and entryists, because if we are toast.
Tom, I want to say thank you for standing up and asking that question. It says so much about our party and its values that you have. And I want to give you a very direct answer. The genius of our party is that we are a broad church. And if you think back to the 1980s, and it was Margaret Thatcher who inspired me to go in politics, you had around that cabinet table Geoffrey Howe, Norman Tebbit, very different people around the same cabinet table. In the 1990s, you had Ken Clarke, John Redwood around the same cabinet table. And what we've always had in our party is a radical tradition, a Thatcherite tradition, that reminds us that a great country needs to do bold things, and we have always understood that as a Conservative Party. But at the same time, another one nation tradition that reminds us that elections are won from the centre ground, and we must always be a compassionate Conservative Party. Put those two traditions together, and it is absolute magic. We are totally unbeatable. Separate them, just do one or just do the other, and we'll be out of power for a generation. So that is the crucial lesson we need to remember.
And then right at the back.
What about the centre ground?
That's what I said.
She's in the centre ground.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hunt. Thank you very much for a very good speech. And I'd like to say that we're very lucky to have two such fantastic candidates to choose from, and it does make it very difficult. My name is Sheila Hilditch, and my question is this. Both of you have said that you will seek a new Brexit deal. Will you do that through amendments to Theresa May's deal, or will you start from scratch and go for an arm's length free trade agreement?
Very important question, Sheila. And I'm going to make your dilemma between the two candidates even more acute, because I don't think on that particular answer there's a lot of difference between me and Boris. We both recognise there are parts of the deal that we have at the moment that can be accepted, and that because time is short, the best way to get a deal won't be to rip the whole thing up and start again. But we both think that the backstop as it stands is not acceptable. It won't get through the House of Commons. That's something that I argued against in Cabinet, and I never believed that it would get through because, we voted, the country voted to take back control, and that backstop has the effect of potentially trapping us with EU customs tariffs until such time as the EU gives us permission to leave. And so that's why we need to find a different way of dealing with the border in Northern Ireland. I think that we can do that with a technology solution. I think it can be done with relatively small but nonetheless significant changes to the deal that we have on the table, and that's what I want to do.
So just to be clear, you will not bring back the withdrawal agreement in any shape or form?
No, not the one that we have at the moment. I will only bring back a deal that can get through the House of Commons, and that means a deal that does not trap us indefinitely in the customs union.
Right, at the back there, and then let's go to the centre ground and have the lady there.
Hi Jeremy, I'm Dan. With numerous delays and spiralling costs, will you as Prime Minister scrap HS2?
I know what he's going to say now.
Straight answer to a straight question, Dan, no. Now, let me explain why. And I know this is a very controversial issue in our party. The point of Brexit is a point when we have to show confidence to the world. This is our biggest infrastructure project. I lived in Japan for a couple of years. That may have been part of the reason why I made that terribly embarrassing mistake a while ago. They had their first high-speed rail between Tokyo and Osaka in 1964. And that was 2 years before I was born. We're going to have ours in 2026. It's going to be better than the Japanese one, but a little bit late. And I think if we're going to be one of the most pro-business, pro-enterprise economies in the world, we've got to get behind these projects. But as Conservatives, we also need to show the country that we are totally committed to spreading wealth throughout the country. We have been talking about the North-South divide for a generation. We now finally have something that can bridge the North-South divide. So, as I say, I know it's not popular, but you want a straight answer to a straight question. I think we have to do HS2.
Right. Can we get the microphone here, please? And then, just to balance the centre ground, we'll go to the extreme right. And, in fact, let's go right at the back. Gentleman there. No, the one that's looking round, you. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Cathy Hudson from Northamptonshire, rural Northamptonshire, and I'm a foster carer. Not had a pay rise in over 8 years. The Northamptonshire County Council is in dire trouble. Social services are in dire trouble, and also social care. So what hope have I got as a foster carer and social care, both children and adults, for both disabled and obviously people that are just generally getting in further troubles with their health?
Well, Cathy, first of all, thank you for the work you do, the incredible work that you and many, many thousands of other people do as a foster carer. And that is so important to the lives of many young people. I was in the government that came into power in 2010 and had to make some very painful cuts in public spending across all our public services. I had to make some of those cuts myself. And I believe that we did the right thing because we had to put the economy back on its feet. We had the worst financial crisis since the Second World War. And the country chose a Conservative government to do those things. But whilst defending what happened, I do think with the benefit of hindsight, we can see that in a couple of specific areas, the cuts went further than we'd anticipated. And one of them is on police numbers, where there was a delayed impact on crime rates. We didn't see it immediately, but we started to see a spike in knife crime, and we have to do something about that, and I will. And the other is on the social care system, where both for children and older people, I don't think that local authorities have had the resources they need to deliver the levels of service that we as Conservatives would always want. So I have been clear that we do have some headroom in our national finances that would allow us to find extra funding for those public services. If we have a no-deal Brexit, then those resources initially will need to go to supporting businesses that are affected by dramatic changes in tariffs. But hopefully we can get a deal, and then we can start to address some of those issues that you talked about.
Just on police numbers, Sajid Javid during the leadership campaign promised an extra 20,000. Boris Johnson has now matched that promise. Will you?
I think I can. As I understand it, I want to see the proposals in detail, but as I understand it, it costs about £900 million a year to do that. And I think that that is possible to do, so yes.
There's a lot of spending pledges being given in this contest, both by you and Boris Johnson. People are accusing you both of not just shaking the magic money tree, but cutting it down and, well, I don't know. How can you afford all of these promises?
Well, let me answer that question very directly. The biggest commitment that I've made, tax commitment, is to reduce corporation tax. Now, the IFS say that will cost £13 billion to get it down to the Irish levels of 12.5%. But you get about half of that money back through increased investment by firms, people paying out more dividends, people employing more people. So it's actually one of the most efficient ways that you can grow the size of our national economy. The other spending commitments I've made, they are things we need to do. Police numbers, the social care system, as Kathy was talking about. But I'm also being honest with people. It would take longer to do those if we had to divert resources to support businesses with a no-deal Brexit.
But it also does mean that borrowing is not going to come down much further in the short term, because this headroom that you both keep talking about, it actually means borrowing.
Well, the headroom that we're talking about is money that is available to spend while still maintaining our commitment to reduce debt as a proportion of GDP, and that would be my fiscal rule, because I don't think any responsible Conservative can be loading up debt on future generations. That would be profoundly unconservative to do that.
Right. Over there. Gentleman over there, and then the lady here. And then we'll come to the extreme left again. It wasn't actually you, sir. It was the behind you. Okay, go on then. Go on then.
You've talked about the past cabinets being a mixture of people and beliefs. If you win, will you invite Boris into your cabinet? And if he wins, would you be prepared to serve under him?
Yes and yes.
You can get a lot more in if you keep on like that. Right, lady here, and then lady in the middle there. No, it's somebody with a hoodie. It isn't a lady, is it? Yeah.
Are you now committed to Brexit because you respect the outcome of a democratic process, or are you fully bought into the case for change, the place we're going? And if the latter, can you share with us your vision of the promised land?
Of course, and a good question to ask, because as you rightly point out, I voted and campaigned for Remain 3 years ago. And the answer to that question is actually both. I voted Remain not from any love of EU institutions, but because I was worried about the short-term economic impact. Remember all those warnings we had about, share prices crashing, house prices crashing, emergency budgets and so on. And I was wrong to believe those forecasts, and I was absolutely delighted to see how resilient our British economy is. And that is why I think we can absolutely flourish and prosper whichever way we leave the EU. And we talk about a no-deal Brexit, and I would never talk lightly about the risks to businesses, but I would also say that we have been through much bigger challenges in our history before. And so I think we can make this a terrific success. But I'm also a Democrat, and I am like millions of people up and down the country who voted to Remain and just want to get on and deliver Brexit, because that is the best thing about our country, one of the great democracies of the world. Everyone's watching them, everyone's watching us, and they want to know we can do it, and we can.
Right, gentleman there, and then gentleman out here.
Hi, my name's Ben Palmer, and I'm a therapist in the NHS. I work with children who experience mental health problems. I've done that for the last 10 years, and over that time, as I know you're aware, the demand on our services has continued to increase. In part, it's because that people find life right now really difficult, really hard to get through. It's full of stress. What would you do as leader in order to make sure life is more manageable, easier for the normal people out there?
Thank you, Ven, and thank you for the work that you do with children. And it really matters, because half of all mental health conditions, as you will know well, are established before the age of 14. And when I was growing up, people had a very low patch. People would just say, pull your socks up, sort it out. We now know that with proper treatment, we can stop these conditions becoming established. And sometimes we can cure people completely, but we can certainly make them much, much more manageable. And because we have a free NHS, which is one of the great British inventions, as people have twigged about the power of effective mental health treatment, of course there's huge demand. And the way that we deal with that, we already, by the way, I think have the best mental health provision anywhere in Europe. That's what the top docs in the NHS tell me. But the way we deal with that is by training more people to be able to deliver mental health services. And that's why when I was Health Secretary, we started a program to increase the number of people in mental health by 19,000, because it takes 7 years to train a psychiatrist, so this isn't going to change overnight. But I think it's a very, very important thing to get right. And final thing I would say, in our schools, we teach people a lot about eating healthily and about staying physically fit. I think we should also be teaching people about how to stay mentally fit, because everyone has to deal with crises in their life. And there are basic things we can all do, like you know, having good friendships and so on. And I think we need to teach people that as well.
Good afternoon, Jeremy. My name's Sam, and I'm a proud local councillor representing an area that is absolutely sick of seeing new houses being built on the green belt. You say one of your pledges is to deliver the homes we need for the young people. Can you tell me how you plan to do that whilst protecting and enhancing our green spaces?
Yes. Yes, I will, and there's another Has to Be Hunt t-shirt on its way to you as well. Depending on this answer, he says. So,
no pressure.
No pressure, exactly. My constituency is 85% greenbelt, an area of outstanding natural beauty, and Conservatives conserve our precious green spaces, not just for ourselves, but for future generations as well, because once you lose them forever. I believe that our planning system, although it has improved, still needs a lot more improving so that we can square exactly the circle that you're talking about. So if I think about the villages in my constituency, if you say to people you're going to lose green belt in order to put houses up that people from outside are going to come and live on and property developers are going to make a lot of money from, then you get universal opposition, and I think that's probably what you're getting from your constituents. If you said to people in my constituency, and I suspect it'd be the same in your division as well, if you said to people, look, we need to find places to build houses so that young people who grew up locally can get a foot on the housing ladder locally, so they don't have to move away from the area, and we're going to allow you to have a proper say as to where those houses go and who they're for, then that opposition starts to melt away. And so I think we need to find a way of dealing with our housing problem in a way that gets the consent of the local communities who those changes are designed to benefit. And that's what my changes will do.
He's hoping you're going to dramatically rip off your T-shirt now. I'm going to finish off with the same final question that I put to Boris. What makes you laugh?
Well, there are lots of ways I could answer that question. But what made me laugh most recently was going on holiday to Scotland with my 5-year-old daughter, who is a bit of a thespian and does the most amazing Scottish accent. And I think...
Feel free to imitate her.
I just had such a fantastic hustings in Scotland last night, and I don't want to throw that down the pan, but I think I'd have to say my kids.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't had enough, they're on their way to Cardiff now to do it all over again tonight. You could follow them if you like. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much, and some of the best questions we've had in all of the hustings. Well done.
Ladies and gentlemen, the mobile phone has been handed in. If the owner would like to come to the back of the room, we